Morning everybody. You're welcome again to another installment in our Gardner YouTube videos. It's the 30th of July 2020. We're still in the midst of COVID lockdown, but we just have to get on with our work here. We've no choice. Just a couple of points before we start. My normal cameraman, my son Brendan, isn't available this morning, so Alice has very kindly taken over his role. Alice is our lovely daughter. She's just going to say hello to you first. We have to explain that it was a bit windy here earlier this morning, so we decided to move the engine a little bit indoors. Now, partially because of that, the film might be a little bit jerky on this occasion. I'm really sorry about that. So, off we go. What might appear at first to be rather a sad example of a Gardner 3LW. I love dismantling these engines because each one has its own peculiarities and its own character. Okay, this 3LW is out of a Smith crane. Now we'll show you the Smith logo on the other side in a few minutes. In the crane, it wasn't used to actually drive the crane itself. As far as I know, Smith used a Rolls-Royce engine for doing that. The Gardner was only used for moving the crane around and shoveling it around on the big caterpillars. So I would suggest that it had quite an easy life. In fact, if you look here now at the rockers, you'll see that they're actually quite free, and that leads me to believe that inside this engine should be okay. She'll restore ground, despite her pathetic appearance at the minute. You'll notice the starter is peculiar to the 3LW. It's not like a conventional Gardner starter that you would get on 6LW or 6LXB, but it's still a CAV starter and works the same way. Right. The thermostat is really quite interesting because it's quite a modern, inverted commas, type Gardner starter. It's got two elements in it. There's a small element here and there's a bigger element down here. Normally on LW engines, there's only one large thermostat element in a single housing here. I think they were introduced sometime later. The fan is really very interesting because the fan is not supported on the engine itself, which is normally the case with Gardners. The fan is actually supported in the radiator structure. You'll notice this member here, which runs right the way across, and it's it that's supporting the fan. And I'm assuming that there's a bearing of some sort in there. Now, that's maybe not so efficient from a cooling point of view because that member is getting in the way of airflow. So somebody has made that design decision at some stage. The radiator itself is really quite beautiful. If you can come in close here, I mean, we'll see more on the other side. And it's got a nameplate up here at the top. I don't know if you can get that. Alice, up there. It's the original Gardner nameplate there. Now, you'll notice here that the starter is actually earthed to the body of the engine, which means the whole electrics is earthed, and the engine itself has been used as a return for the electric current. In another video, I explained how that's not such a good idea in a marine application, but in a crane, it doesn't really matter that much. So we have here, this is the gearbox that would have driven the caterpillars as I described. We've got a clutch here with a clutch lever here, and there's a flexible coupling down in here. And here we've got a big lever which would have been used for changing gear, perhaps for reverse. I'm not too sure about that. And here we have this big pinion gear here, which would have taken a chain out to drive the locomotion. Now, as I said, the head doesn't seem to be too bad at all. Look, the decompression levers are still working. Now, my objective is to try and take the gearbox away from the engine and to take the engine away from this base plate, because it simply takes up too much space in the workshop. So in order to do that, I've taken off these nuts here which clamp the clutch mechanism onto the flywheel, and I've undone the big bolts here which held the gearbox down onto the chassis. Now later today we'll try and pull that off. We hope to video it, but it might not work out, so I won't promise for sure. We'll have a go at it. Some interesting features here. It has what appears to be a kind of Morse cable here for controlling the throttle. Now, I would have thought that Morse was a bit modern for the Smith crane, but I could be wrong on that. The bar through here for the throttle has been broken, but that'll not be a problem. We'll replace that quite easily. And this is only a minor issue here. That pipe went up to there like that. I'm not too sure there's a lot more that I can show you. Ah yes, the dynamo. This is a dynamo. There's a short shaft there connecting the dynamo to the auxiliary shaft here. Now, I'm not too sure. I can't see anywhere on here if it's 24 volt or 12. I'm hoping that it's 24, because 24 volt dynamos, and in particular 24 volt cutouts, this is the cutout or regulator here, are really quite hard to find. So if that is 24, that'll be really quite useful. You'll remember, I think on another video I described to you where it's a problem to fit an alternator on here because this shaft doesn't rotate fast enough for an alternator. But a dynamo is quite happy on there and will produce charging current at quite low RPM. You might like to see a little bit more of the detail of the radiator if you come around here. You'll see that the radiator is really quite beautiful, and that will restore no problem. You'll notice here a shaft. This was used for a starting handle. A starting handle hooked on here. The whole of this shaft moved in and engaged in a dog clutch in here, and then you were able to start her by hand. Okay, we've just shot another very quick video showing you how we've taken off the gearbox. You can actually see the gearbox remnants outside here. I'm really sorry I couldn't video the actual removal. It just didn't work out for us. Sorry about that. Maybe there'll be some other occasion. Okay, that's all that I've got for you now in regard to this engine. Sorry about that, I've got a frog in my throat. I'm really quite excited about this engine. 3LWs are quite sought after for narrow boats and even a small generators or whatever, pumps even. But particularly for marine engines, they're quite sought after. The engine number on this one is 141119, which is quite a high number. It means that in Gardner terms, relatively, it's quite a modern engine. Okay, if you're interested in this engine, please feel free to send me an email. You'll see the email address and the website address at the end of these videos. You'll also see just before that a photograph of what this engine could look like in the not too distant future. Thank you so much. Bye bye.